Good morning and welcome to another edition of News and Views with me, Salailo Makwidi, right here on Salam Media, where we don't just follow the headlines, but we break it all down for you. And today we've got a big one. Overnight, Donald Trump made a surprise announcement. A total ceasefire between Israel and Iran has officially begun. And in his own exact words, and I quote, "Please do not violate it." But while Trump claims to have brokered peace, Tehran state media says he practically begged for it. Either way, after nearly 2 weeks of missile strikes, military threats, and regional chaos, it seems the guns are falling silent, at least for now. But here at home, the silence has been deafening for a different reason. South Africa's leaders have barely said a word about the ongoing war between Iran and Israel, and with Israel reportedly driving this U.S. action. The political balancing act for our capital, Pretoria, just got a lot more, let's say, dangerous. We're unpacking this global fallout, the regional consequences of this war, and what it all means for South Africa. In a bit, we'll be joined by South Africa's journalist. She's a senior journalist at Daily Maverick, Rebecca Davids, and has written a razor-sharp piece on the diplomatic storm created by the U.S. bombing of Iran at Israel's request, and most importantly, why South African leaders, for once, seem at a total loss for words. Rebecca's joining us via our virtual platform. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time. Good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all ours. I think we can start with, the headlines, the biggest story in the last few hours. A ceasefire has been announced by Donald Trump, and he's telling both sides not to mess it up. What do you make of this sudden peace push, and do you actually buy it?
I'm not sure I do buy it because I've already seen reports from Reuters that there have been Iranian strikes after Trump's announcement of the ceasefire. We don't know quite what that means because obviously there will be a sort of period before it takes effect formally, which is to say that perhaps those strikes were pre-planned before the ceasefire was announced. But either way, it seems at best to be a very tentative arrangement, and we all have to see. I mean, so much of what is happening at the moment is completely up in the air. Things are changing virtually every hour. By tomorrow, this landscape may look totally different. I have very little faith in what Donald Trump puts on social media because we've seen this before. It's often a kind of personal wish fulfillment that's sort of unconnected to what is going on actually behind the scenes. Let's see.
Let's focus on your piece. I think you wrote quite extensively about South Africa's silence, and some of our most vocal politicians, like Fikile Mbalula and Gayton McKenzie, being rather mum when it comes to this issue from a South African point of view. How should we be perceiving? How should we be reacting to this Iran-Israel war that could essentially see the whole of the Middle East into a full-blown crisis?
I lost you a little bit there, but it has been very interesting to spoken opinions about global events, not just South African events, global events, have fallen silent following the strike on Iranian nuclear facilities by the US. And by that, I mean, I think it was only EFF leader Julius Malema who made an outright statement on the matter, saying that South Africa should stand with Iran, that South Africa stands with Palestine, etc. Of course, we did see a relatively weak statement from Cyril Ramaphosa himself, the president, on Sunday, in which he said he was disappointed by the strikes. He issued a kind of very weak reprimand to Donald Trump, saying that he had hoped that the involvement of the US would bring a peaceful resolution to this, and he called on the UN to kind of negotiate, as is Ramaphosa's way. But from, the ANC, from the DA, from the Patriotic Alliance, from these parties which are normally not shy to weigh in on international affairs, there has been complete silence. And the reason has to be that it is a very delicate diplomatic situation for South Africa. On the one hand, we're in a situation where we are still up in the air about what is going to happen with our trade deal with the US. There's now 2 weeks to go until we are potentially hit with high tariffs, 30% tariffs. So this is a very delicate period, and we cannot afford to to alienate the US administration any further unless we want really punitive economic effects for South Africa and for exporters and importers, etc. On the other hand, of course, we have this commitment to Palestine. We have taken Israel to the ICJ in this very principled stand against what is happening in Gaza. And it is very clear that the US strike on Iran was carried out at the behest, at the request of the Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu. How do we reconcile these things? We cannot simply accept, as Pretoria, the strike on Iran happening, knowing full well that it was done with the Israelis, at the Israelis' request, at the same time as we're trying to appease America. It's a very delicate situation politically. And honestly, for once, I don't blame the politicians for sort of hanging back on this one, because it is difficult to know exactly what stance they can take without putting their feet in it one way or the other.
Just looking forward now with the announcement of this, U.S. brokered peace deal. What do you think should be South Africa's next move? Should this neutrality continue to happen? I mean, Iran, for instance, is one of our BRICS Plus partners. Should we, I don't know, say something on that regard, or just continue with things as they are? You mentioned the Donald Trump effect and not upsetting the USA, especially given the already tense relationship we have with the Trump administration. It's going to be an interesting couple of days going forward.
Yeah, look, I mean, yes, Iran is our partner in BRICS Plus, as you rightly say, and has been since last year. But if we look at what the other BRICS partners are doing and saying, China issued a fairly strong statement against the US strike. But Russia, for instance, which is a closer ally of Iran than we are, has said it's simply not getting involved because there are so many Russian speakers who live in Israel that they just can't get involved. And Saudi Arabia, which is also now part of BRICS Plus, also taking quite a neutral stand on this. So if we're taking the example of our BRICS partners, then it is acceptable, I think, to maintain a fairly neutral stance, because it's not like any of them are rushing to Iran's defense. Even people you might think would be in a position to help with their defense militarily. We're not seeing that from them. So from that perspective, why should South Africa stick its neck out in a way that its other allies are not? I mean, India has incredibly strong close relationships with Iran, and we haven't seen them sort of ride out to Iran's defense here. So the pragmatic approach to take here might be simply for South Africa to sort of keep its head down a bit, not to say or do anything that will render its stance over Israel hypocritical, because we have really very firmly staked out that ideological position now. I think it would be a terrible mistake for us to renege on it at this point, but also to try as much as possible not to antagonize America in the face of the clearly unstable and volatile Trump administration.
No, definitely. I wanna let you go because unfortunately we have run out of time. But there's so much happening, when it comes to the Middle East. The issue of Gaza and the genocide that's happening there is still ongoing. Let's assess what we could maybe expect to happen in a few days. When you look at your proverbial crystal ball, what other developments do you see coming out of the situation?
I mean, I think one of the awful things about this situation is that inevitably the world's attention is turning towards Iran and away from Gaza. So as this all happens, we're still seeing people massacred waiting for food in Gaza. Those atrocities continue now, and in a way have been given a small amount of cover because the world is effectively distracted by what is happening in Iran. At the same time, there's little doubt that prior to this, the world was turning against Israel in terms of popular opinion quite significantly. This weekend, we saw tens of thousands of protesters in European capitals coming out to protest against Israel, to say we won't put up with what is happening in Gaza. And we've also seen polls suggesting a really record low level of support for what Israel is doing in Gaza. So there seemed to be little doubt going up to this point that Israel was losing the PR war. But what will be necessary now for those who care about what is happening in Gaza to keep a really sustained pressure on, and to make sure that events in Iran do not completely distract from what is happening that side of the world.
All right. I think we're going to leave it here for now. Rebecca Davis, senior journalist at Daily Maverick. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and I hope we chat soon.
You're welcome.
There you go. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really interesting couple of weeks, especially looking at what's happening in the Middle East. And yeah, it really puts things into perspective. This global ceasefire, I think there's a lot to unpack from it. Is it really a U.S. brokered one, or one where there was a realization from both, Israel and the USA that they're dealing with a power here. They're dealing with a strong militarily equipped country, and there's no other way. It's either you call for a ceasefire or risk the whole of the Middle East going into turmoil. And from a South African point of view, Pretoria's place in the world is again under the spotlight. And saying nothing might just say everything. Okay. And as we keep an eye, or at least continue to keep an eye on the so-called peace between Iran and Israel, or a begged one by Donald Trump, I think we'll also be watching closely how Pretoria chooses to respond, if at all. And it's clear that silence might be safe, but is it really leadership at this point? Yeah, tiptoeing around issues. And I think Rebecca makes some very, very important points. Look at some of the trade deals. I mean, that deadline about all of the tariffs coming into place, I think is coming soon. The issue of AGOA is also a question mark. We know of South Africa's severed relations with the United States of America. And I think, yeah, maybe in the greater scheme of things, letting things be and keeping quiet, and towing the proverbial diplomatic line is the best thing that our government can do for now. All right, big thank you to my guest today, Rebecca Davis. We're going to take a quick break. If you missed any of our interviews, you can head out to our social media pages. Just search at Salam Media. You can also give us a call. Our studio line is 01168000355. On WhatsApp, we are at 06176600355. Do you think South Africa should have given a more stronger condemnation of the USA and of Israel because of the events of the last 2 weeks? Or do you think the stance that our government chose to take, diplomatic, no strong words of condemnation, but still saying we are cautiously, analyzing what's happening in the Middle East, and it's a concern for all of us? Do you think that's maybe, better? Because let's be honest, the ICJ had its ramifications. I think we are where we are right now with the United States because of that case. And maybe our government may be thinking, "Aish, our economy can take so many hits before it collapses." But what about the truth? What about real leadership and condemning what is clear for the whole world to see? An Israeli pariah state that wants to see the world burn. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues after this.